She took the house, the car, our savings, said I'd move on eventually. What she didn't know was the safe she ignored held more than just metal and paper. It held the end of her plan and the start of mine. I stayed quiet then, but I'm ready to talk now. The email came through just after midnight. I was halfway across the world, boots deep in dust and sand, sipping cold instant coffee from a cracked thermos when the ping hit my inbox. I remember staring at the subject line for a long time. Let's be adults about this. That's how she started it. Like we were settling a dispute over dishes, not ending a 12-year marriage. The message itself was only 4 sentences. She said she'd already filed the paperwork, already moved out of our house, and already cleaned out our joint account. "I'm done waiting," she wrote, just like that. I didn't say anything, not out loud, not to anyone. I didn't slam the laptop or curse at the screen. I closed the browser, finished my coffee, and went back to the comms tent like nothing had happened. My hands were steady, my breathing normal. But something inside me shifted, just slightly, like a hairline crack in glass. Invisible at first, but growing. I took a long shower that night. The kind where you don't even bother using soap. You just let the water hit your back and think about all the things you should have seen coming. I dressed in silence, reported for night watch. No one noticed anything was different. That's one thing the Army teaches you. How to keep your face straight when your whole world is coming apart behind it. Later, when I got back to my bunk, I opened the email again. Read every word like it might change if I stared hard enough. It didn't. I hit reply and typed a single word. Understood. Then I powered down and laid back on my cot, hands behind my head, eyes fixed on the ceiling of the tent like it had the answers I didn't. Across from me, Bennett was reading a dog-eared copy of The Martian. He glanced over. "You good?" he asked, casual, like he was asking if I wanted the last protein bar. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded, didn't press. That's the thing about guys like Bennett. They don't ask questions unless you need them to. And I didn't. Not yet. Truth was, I wasn't shocked. Hurt, yeah, but not surprised. Rachel had been slipping away for a while. She stopped asking about my missions, stopped waiting up for my calls, started working later, started going out more. Gym bags packed but never used. Passwords changed. Phone always face down. I didn't accuse her. Didn't dig through her things. That's not who I am. But I noticed. And I prepared. Because I know how life works out here. Unexpected hits, friendly faces turning cold, and people taking what they think you won't miss. She took everything she thought I had. But Rachel never asked what was in the safe, and that was her first mistake. The hardest part wasn't the email. It wasn't the money being gone or the image of another man sleeping in my bed. It was waking up the next morning and pretending nothing had changed. Because out there, in that kind of heat, with that kind of pressure, you don't have the luxury of falling apart. You wake up, lace your boots, and get to it. Feelings can get you killed. I went through the motions like I always had. Morning check-in, gear inspection, briefings. I double-checked the convoy logs even though I'd memorized them. I monitored the radio longer than I needed to. I ate my rations without tasting a bite. No one noticed. No one said a thing. That's the thing about the military. You learn to wear your silence like armor. And mine was ironclad. I took another shower that night, let the water run long and hot even though I knew I was only supposed to take 2 minutes. I leaned against the wall, hands pressed flat, head down, and just let the heat soak into my shoulders. I didn't cry. Couldn't, even if I wanted to. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything soft inside me and replaced it with cold steel. I kept hearing her words over and over in my head. Let's be adults about this. That's what stuck with me the most. Not the fact that she'd taken everything, not the fact that she'd replaced me in our life like I was an old couch. But that line, clinical, rehearsed, like she was sparing herself from having to feel anything at all. That told me more than she realized. Back at my bunk, I stared at the ceiling again. The same sheet metal as the night before. Same rattling fan, same distant hum of a generator outside. But something had changed. Me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was focused. I'd been trained to respond to threats with precision, to assess situations without emotion. Now, that training kicked in. This wasn't heartbreak. This was an operation, and I was already planning the next move. I pulled my notebook from the footlocker, flipped to a fresh page, wrote 3 words at the top: secure, recover, reclaim. Then I started a list. What accounts she had access to, what assets were legally mine, what steps I'd taken before I left. I wasn't starting from zero, and she didn't know that. Across the room, Bennett was snoring, completely unaware. And I was grateful for that, for the silence. It gave me room to think, room to draw lines in the sand. She thought she'd won, thought she'd blindsided me. But Rachel didn't realize that while she was playing checkers, I'd been trained for chess, and now the game had officially begun. Looking back, the signs were always there. They didn't come all at once. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like the slow dimming of a room, where you don't notice the darkness until you're already standing in it. About 6 months before deployment, Rachel started changing, not in a loud or obvious way. She was too smart for that. It was quieter than that, subtle, intentional. She started staying late at work, said the new office manager was a mess and someone had to keep things together. I believed her. At first. Then came the gym sessions, 3 times a week, suddenly. But her shoes always looked clean and her clothes barely smelled of sweat. She said she was doing yoga. Low impact, she called it. I nodded. Didn't question. I wanted to trust her. I really did. Then the phone habits changed. She used to leave it on the coffee table while we watched shows. Suddenly, it never left her hand. Always face down. Always locked. She started smiling at texts she wouldn't talk about. I didn't ask, didn't snoop. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't built that way. I wasn't going to beg for answers someone wasn't offering. One night I came home from training early. She was on the phone in the kitchen, laughing in a voice I hadn't heard in months. Soft, flirty. The second she saw me, her face changed. She ended the call too fast, said it was her cousin. She doesn't have a cousin named Marcus. That's when something clicked for me. Not rage, not heartbreak, just awareness. A tactical shift. I realized I couldn't control what she was doing, but I could control how I responded. I didn't confront her. I didn't demand confessions or start fights I couldn't win. I simply started preparing. First, I got a storage unit across town under my name only. I started moving things. My grandfather's Navy medals, the coin collection he left me, old photos, legal documents, birth certificates, the deed to the house, which, thanks to the VA loan, was in my name alone. I opened a separate account at a credit union she didn't know about. Not much, just enough to matter if things went sideways. I even stashed away a hard copy of our prenup, just in case. Every move was quiet, calculated, like setting tripwires in the dark. Not because I wanted to use them, but because I couldn't afford to be caught unprepared. Rachel started talking about space around that time, about how she felt like we'd grown apart. Said maybe it was just the army life. I nodded, agreed with her, told her maybe we just needed some time. Truth was, I didn't know what she was building, but I knew what I needed to protect, and I knew how to wait. By the time I boarded the transport plane, most of my groundwork was already done. I didn't tell anyone, not my brothers, not my unit, not even my closest friend back home. Some storms you don't announce, you just start sandbagging the perimeter. It started small. The storage unit was the first thing. I found one on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a clean, dry space with a steel door and a number I memorized. I filled it slowly, a few things at a time, each item carefully chosen. My grandfather's coins, my dad's watch, my mom's Bible, things that wouldn't mean anything to Rachel but meant everything to me. I placed them into a locked box, wrapped in towels, and set them in the back of the unit like a private grave of my past. Next was the paperwork. The house deed, legally mine through the VA loan, was photocopied and placed in a fireproof envelope. I did the same with my military benefits paperwork, life insurance, service records, the prenup she never liked to talk about. Printed, sealed, stored. I opened a new bank account under a different institution, one Rachel didn't know I had any connection to. I had my direct deposit split quietly, just enough to build a buffer, not enough to raise questions, just enough to matter. I wasn't expecting a war. Not exactly. But something about Rachel's eyes those last few months had told me not to expect peace either. She looked at me differently, not with hate, but with distance, like I was a character she no longer believed in. And the thing is, I might have kept playing along, might have kept pretending we could fix things after deployment, but the Army taught me better. Never ignore your instincts, never leave your flank exposed. So I moved with care. No accusations, no shouting matches. Just quiet moves in the shadows. A man preparing for the fight no one wants to believe is coming. I remember the night before I deployed. She dropped me at the airport in jeans and a hoodie like she was going grocery shopping, not saying goodbye to her husband heading into a combat zone. Her hug was short, her eyes dry. "Stay safe," she said like she was clocking out for the day. I nodded. Didn't say what I was thinking. If she noticed anything different about me, my silence, my distance, she never said. But I had already drawn the line in my head. There were things she could take, and things she couldn't. I didn't know the full scope of what was coming, but I knew enough to prepare. Because Rachel may have been planning a clean break, but I was preparing for extraction. We bought the house in 2015, just after my second deployment. It wasn't anything fancy. 3 bedrooms, old siding, a patchy lawn that needed more love than we gave it. But it was ours. I remember the day we signed the papers. Rachel was beaming, talking about paint colors and herb gardens and hosting little get-togethers on the back patio. I was just happy to have roots again, a place to come home to. Because of my VA loan, the mortgage was in my name. That was non-negotiable. But I added Rachel to the deed without hesitation. Didn't even blink. She didn't ask for it. I offered. Because that's what love looked like to me back then. Not just sharing space or splitting bills, but giving someone a piece of what you built with your own hands. I thought it was a gesture of trust, a way of saying, we're in this together. I see now how wrong I was. Rachel never really liked the house, not in the way I did. She liked the idea of it, of being a homeowner, of showing friends pictures of new countertops and remodeled bathrooms, but she never loved the bones of the place. She'd complain about the creaky floors, the leaky sink in the guest bath, the way the furnace kicked on with a groan in winter. I didn't mind any of it. I'd patch things up, fix what I could, laugh about the rest. Over time, her complaints grew sharper, louder. We should have gotten something nicer, she'd say after visiting friends in newer neighborhoods. This place just feels small. I'd point out that it was what we could afford, that it was ours, that it had history and heart. But she'd already stopped listening. The last project I worked on before deployment was the kitchen. I ripped out the old cabinets, installed new ones with soft close hinges, even laid down tile with my own 2 hands. Rachel said she loved it, kissed me on the cheek and called me her handy soldier. But she barely used the kitchen after that. I did most of the cooking. She started eating out more. Sometimes I wonder if the house reminded her of the version of herself she was trying to outgrow. The part of her that once said she was proud of being a military wife. The part that decorated our guest room with framed photos from my deployments and hung the flag my grandfather was buried under above the mantel. I think by the time I was packing for Afghanistan, she'd already left in spirit. The house didn't feel like home to her anymore. It felt like an anchor. And maybe it was. But it was my anchor. My history, my name on the loan, my sweat in every floorboard and wall. She thought because her name was on the deed, she could do what she wanted. She forgot who built it. The airport was crowded, chaotic the way it always is before a deployment. Families clinging to each other, kids too young to understand waving tiny flags, spouses pretending they weren't breaking. I'd been through that terminal more times than I could count, but this time felt different. Not because of the mission, because of Rachel. She walked beside me, silent for most of it, tapping her phone screen between glances at the terminal signs. We stopped for coffee on the way, but she barely touched hers. Said her stomach hurt. I asked if she was okay, and she nodded like the question annoyed her. The woman I married used to squeeze my hand so tight I'd lose circulation before a flight. Now she barely looked up from her latte. When we reached the security checkpoint, she hugged me. Quick, one arm across my back, a pat like you'd give someone you worked with on their last day. Her body was stiff, her eyes dry. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a wife saying goodbye to her husband. This was someone checking the last item off a to-do list. She looked up at me and said, "Stay safe, okay?" Then she stepped back, folded her arms across her chest, and offered me the same smile she used to give the neighbors. Polite. Empty. I nodded and grabbed my rucksack. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. I think part of me already knew what that hug really meant. As I handed over my ID and passed through the scanner, I looked back. She was gone. Didn't even wait to watch me board. Just disappeared into the crowd like she'd already moved on. Maybe she had. On the plane, I stared out the window and played that hug over and over again in my mind. The lack of warmth, the absence of fear. Like she wasn't worried she might never see me again. Like she didn't care if she did. I kept trying to tell myself I was imagining it, that she was just tired. That saying goodbye is hard in different ways for everyone. But deep down, I knew. Something had shifted. The woman I'd married, the one who used to cry over my boots in the laundry basket when I left, was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone who had already made a choice. I just hadn't seen it until now. Still, I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that when I landed, there'd be a message waiting for me. Something soft, something real. Instead, weeks later, I got an email with a PDF and a line that started with, "Let's be adults about this." She had already left. That hug at the airport wasn't a goodbye, it was a release. It was 2 weeks after I arrived in country when the notification hit my phone. The base Wi-Fi was garbage, but bank alerts don't wait for good signal. I was walking back from a shift change, dust thick in the air, sweat clinging to my back under the vest, when I heard the familiar ping. I thought it was just the usual, maybe a paycheck deposit or a balance update, routine stuff. But this one wasn't routine. It was a withdrawal alert, $14,500, then another just a few hours later, $9,000, and then $22,000. My pulse didn't spike, my breath didn't hitch, but I felt it. This cold weight in my chest, like something just snapped loose and was drifting. I opened the app. The joint account was nearly empty. Less than $50 left. The savings, once sitting just above 80 grand, was down to a few hundred. She'd drained everything. I stood there on the gravel path, the hot sun pounding down on my shoulders, phone screen glowing in my hand, and for the first time in my life I couldn't feel the ground under my feet. I just stood there, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves if I waited long enough. They didn't. Back at the phone center, I waited nearly an hour to get through to someone at the bank. The line crackled, the connection dropped twice, but I finally got a woman named Tanya on the other end. I gave her my information, passed the security checks, and asked for a full transaction history. She hesitated before speaking. That was all I needed. "Mr. Briggs, it looks like there have been a series of transfers over the past few weeks," she said, her voice going soft like she was afraid of how I'd react. "The activity began the day after your last withdrawal, 14 days ago. The day after I left for deployment, small amounts at first, hundreds here, 1,000 there, then larger ones, straight into an account I didn't recognize, all in Rachel's name. No joint signatures, no communication, no warning. I asked Tanya to flag the account for suspicious activity, but I already knew there was nothing they could do. She was legally an owner. She had full access. She didn't need permission. She didn't need me." I hung up and sat there in the hallway, the low hum of fluorescent lights above me, soldiers walking past on their way to dinner or downtime or another shift. I couldn't hear them. I couldn't move. My hands were steady, but my mind was a storm. She hadn't just left. She'd been planning this, calculated, precise, like a mission, and I didn't even see it coming. Rachel didn't just break our marriage. She executed it. Wilson didn't ask for details. That's the thing about guys who've seen too much. They know when to keep their mouths shut and their ears open. I was sitting on my bunk, staring at nothing, when he tossed me a protein bar and sat across from me with a tired look in his eyes. "You good?" he asked, like he already knew the answer. I nodded once. "Just home stuff. He watched me for a second, then leaned back against the wall. "What's your move?" That was it. No sympathy, no cheap comfort, just strategy, a soldier's question. "What's your move?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. Not exactly. But that night, after lights out, after the barracks had gone quiet and the only sound was the distant thrum of generators and someone coughing in their sleep, I sat up, pulled out my laptop, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside was everything I needed: login credentials, IP addresses, camera feeds. Before I left for deployment, I'd upgraded our home security system, installed a full set: front porch, backyard, garage, living room. Rachel had been annoyed at the time. "What are we, a bank?" she'd joked. But she never asked for the logins, never thought I'd keep them. She forgot who installed the system. The feed took a few minutes to load. Signal wasn't great, but it was enough. The image flickered to life, and there it was. My living room. Familiar. Clean. My dog curled up on the couch. And then he walked in. A man I'd never seen before. Tall, smug. Confident in the way only people who think they've gotten away with something can be. He carried a gym bag, used my coffee mug, petted my dog like he'd been doing it for weeks. Then Rachel came in from the hallway, wearing the Seahawks hoodie I'd left hanging by the back door. She leaned into him, kissed his cheek, laughed at something he whispered. They looked comfortable. At home. I stared at the screen, not moving, not breathing. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. The betrayal was real, but the surprise was long gone. I'd seen the writing months ago. I just hadn't let myself read it. I opened a note on my laptop and started typing. Step 1. Call James, Army buddy, now a lawyer in Spokane. Step 2. Check the terms of the VA loan. Confirm that refinancing without my consent wasn't legal. Step 3. Review any changes to insurance or property documents, especially anything Rachel might have hinted at in the past few months. Step 4. Secure military pension and access points. Confirm secondary accounts are untouched. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was focus. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about reclaiming what was mine. Rachel thought I'd never see the cameras, never follow the trail. She forgot who she married. There's a moment when your stomach should drop, your fists should clench, your pulse should spike. But none of that happened. Not when I saw the man in the flannel. Not when he poured coffee into the mug I'd used every morning for 5 years. Not even when my dog wagged his tail and followed him into the living room like he belonged there. Because I'd already run out of shock. All that was left was clarity. I watched the footage in silence, the room around me dark except for the soft blue light from my laptop. Rachel walked into the frame a minute later. She was barefoot, hair up, holding a bowl of cereal like it was a Saturday morning and not the aftermath of a precision betrayal. She laughed at something the man said, threw her head back, touched his arm, leaned in. That laugh. God, that laugh. It used to be mine. She looked free, relaxed, unburdened. And maybe she was. Maybe wiping out our accounts, moving her new man into our house, and slapping a divorce notice on my deployment was her version of liberation. I paused the video, my flannel, my mug, my dog, my life. Not rage. Not yet. Just something colder, cleaner, precision. I grabbed my notebook and started a new page. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was logistics. Step 1. Asset protection. Anything left under both names was vulnerable. Needed to shift accounts, close cards, freeze credit if possible. I made notes to call the bank again, ask for a security freeze and notify them of possible unauthorized transfers. Step 2. Property. The VA loan meant the mortgage was in my name. I needed the original deed, which I'd already stored in the unit. Good. Next, I needed to verify the title hadn't been touched. No new liens, no shady paperwork filed behind my back. I'd have James check county records. Step 3. Documentation. That safe in the garage. She probably thought it was full of old papers and expired passports. She didn't know it held bearer bonds from my grandfather, a hardware wallet with crypto I hadn't touched in years, and legal records tied to the land in Montana he'd left me. All of it still mine, still untouched, and off her radar. Step 4. Surveillance. Keep pulling footage, catalog it, store it off-site. I started saving clips with timestamps. Every frame with the man in the house, every moment Rachel smiled like nothing she did mattered. The list grew fast. Call the credit union, lock down pension access, pull medical and military benefit logs. Check the car title. Every task sharpened my focus. She had gutted our marriage and tried to walk away with the bones. But she forgot one thing. I don't start fights, but I never lose them. Rachel was always more concerned with what could be seen. The car, the furniture, the framed pictures on the wall. She liked things that sparkled, that impressed her friends during wine nights and backyard cookouts. The safe in the garage? That never interested her. She thought it was just some leftover military thing, steel box, bolts drilled into concrete, code only I knew. She once asked what I kept in there. I told her, old files, stuff for work. She rolled her eyes and never asked again. Good. Because while she was busy draining our accounts and moving her boyfriend into my house, she never once thought about what she couldn't see. She didn't know that I'd spent the last few years moving real value into that safe little by little every time I came back from a deployment. It started with my grandfather's coin collection. He'd spent decades curating it. Rare mints, uncirculated currency, even a couple war-era gold coins he swore were worth more than my truck. When he passed, they came to me. I had them appraised and then locked them away. Then came the crypto wallet. Not some cloud login or an app on my phone. A cold storage device, hardware, untraceable. The seed phrases were handwritten and stored separately. I'd invested modestly during one of the dips, sat on it, forgot about it. By the time Rachel filed those papers, that wallet was worth 6 figures. And finally, the bearer bonds, left to me in a sealed trust from my dad's side. Unregistered, no names, no trail. Legal and powerful if you knew how to handle them. She didn't. Most people don't even know they exist anymore. All of it was in that safe, all of it beyond her reach. She took the checking account, the savings, my truck, even my dog. She moved a stranger into our bed, deleted our photos from her social media, and filed the paperwork like I was already dead. But she never touched the safe, never even tried. Maybe she thought it wasn't worth the effort. Maybe she assumed it held nothing but tax folders and dusty medals. Or maybe she was just too busy playing house with a man who wore my clothes and drank my coffee to notice what she'd missed. But that safe was the reason I wasn't panicking. It was the reason I could breathe while everything else crumbled. Because Rachel had taken the surface. And I still had the foundation. Out here, in a place where trust gets people killed and silence is a survival skill, I'd learned a simple truth. Never put your future in someone else's hands. She thought she'd taken everything. She didn't even know where the real power was hidden. When my boots hit US soil, I didn't tell a soul. No calls to Rachel, no social media posts, not even a heads up to my brothers back in Denver. I moved like a shadow, quiet, deliberate, invisible. I wasn't home for a reunion. I was here for recon. I checked into a cheap motel near base using a name that wasn't mine. The desk clerk didn't ask questions, just slid me the key and pointed toward a room with a broken vending machine outside. Fine by me. I didn't come for comfort. I reached out to James through a secure line. We'd served together in Fallujah before he traded his rifle for a law degree and an office with a hardwood desk. He was sharp, dangerous in a suit, and had a taste for legal battles that most lawyers would flinch from. When he answered the phone and I told him what happened, there was a long silence. Then, meet me tomorrow. Usual diner, 0900. I barely slept that night. Not from nerves, from focus. My brain was a gear system, turning at full speed, cataloging documents, dates, details. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's boyfriend walking my dog, using my mug, living my life. The next morning, I drove to the diner, a rundown place 10 miles outside town that hadn't changed since the 80s. James was already there, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, nursing a cup of black coffee. He stood when I walked in, gave me the kind of handshake that told me he still trained 4 days a week. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth. "Feel like it too." I handed him a folder, photocopies of the deed, the loan agreement, screenshots from the security footage, bank transaction histories. He flipped through it fast, scanning like a machine. Then he paused, lifted one page, and raised an eyebrow. "Your name's the only one on the mortgage," he said. "Yeah. She can't refinance without your signature." "She did." He whistled low. "That's forgery. Felony." She added her boyfriend to the documents. James nodded slowly, face tightening. "Let's do this smart," he said. "Not loud, not fast. We build this right." He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Power of attorney triggers, fraud claim processes, notarization audits. We talked through chain of title scenarios, Virginia loan protections, and how to notify the bank discreetly. James was a tactician. That's why I came to him. He didn't care about drama. He cared about results. By the time I left that booth, we had a blueprint. A silent, precise takedown. Nothing flashy. Just pressure, applied in the right places at the right time. Rachel thought she'd erased me, that she'd rewritten the narrative and replaced me with someone newer, more convenient. She forgot I know how to fight, and I never come home without a plan. James called me 2 days later, said he'd pulled the refinance documents from the county recorder's office. "You're going to want to see this in person," he said. I already knew what it meant, but I still drove to his office like I might be wrong, like maybe there was another explanation. There wasn't. He laid the papers out on his desk in a neat row. Mortgage refinance agreement, new terms, cash-out clause, a signature line with my name printed underneath. I leaned in, looked at the pen strokes. It was close. Someone had studied my writing. But they got one thing wrong. The middle initial was off, and the loop on the in my last name was too sharp. Rachel had always made hers like that. I never did. "You didn't sign this," James said. It wasn't a question. "No." "And this?" He pointed at another signature, Jeremy Ryan, her boyfriend, co-applicant. He might as well have signed it with a grin. "Did they use a notary?" I asked. "They tried," he said, "but it's fake. Stamp doesn't match any registered license in the state. I've already filed a query with the county notary board." So this is fraud. Clear as day. He didn't say "I'm sorry" or "that's rough." That's not James. He said, "Now we put pressure." He pulled up a list. Contacts at the bank, people in the fraud investigation department. He knew exactly where to go and how to speak their language. Every industry has pressure points. James knew where the nerves were. We filed the complaint the next morning. Official letterhead, attached documents, and a warning. Continued distribution of funds tied to a forged application would constitute financial negligence on the bank's part. It got their attention. They flagged the account, paused the release of any remaining funds. But that was just step one. Rachel and Jeremy had already pulled nearly half of it. The clock was ticking. James was calm, methodical. "We don't just stop them," he said. "We corner them." We contacted the local police to file an identity theft report, brought in the forged documents. It wouldn't lead to an arrest, not yet, but it created a paper trail, a record. We weren't just two angry men with a grudge. We were building a case. I sat in James's office long after the forms were signed, watching the afternoon light filter through his blinds. My hands were calm, my voice steady. But inside I was coiled tight. This wasn't just about stolen money anymore. This was about my name, my integrity, my life. Rachel thought she could fake a signature and walk away clean. She didn't realize I'd be coming home to sign off on her consequences. It was James who made the connection first. He was going over the co-applicant details on the refinance forms when he paused, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Jeremy Ryan. That name's familiar." He started typing fast, the way he did when a theory clicked in his head. A few minutes later, he turned the screen toward me. There he was, Jeremy Ryan. Not just Rachel's new boyfriend, a licensed real estate agent. He wasn't working under a major firm either, just some bare-bones LLC that specialized in quick cash solutions for distressed sellers. The website was thin, generic copy, stock photos. But the language was familiar. Too familiar. "He's done this before," James said. "Look at this." He pulled up a property record from 2 years ago. A woman named Elena Morales. husband deployed in the Navy, sold her house in a quick cash deal. Buyer, a holding company connected to Jeremy's LLC. Then another and another. 3 different women, all military spouses. All sold their homes within 3 months of the husband's deploying. All refinanced just before listing. All with forged or questionable paperwork. Every time the home sold below market. Every time Jeremy's name appeared somewhere on the record, agent, buyer's rep, LLC owner. Take your pick. This is a pattern, James said. He finds women who feel abandoned, lonely, frustrated. Whispers in their ear that they're owed more, helps them cash out, makes his cut, disappears. And Rachel? He hesitated. Could be she's a victim, could be she's in on it, or maybe she doesn't care enough to ask questions. My jaw tightened. The images from the security footage flashed in my mind. Jeremy in my hoodie, my dog by his side, Rachel laughing like betrayal was something you could sip with your morning coffee. We weren't just dealing with a failed marriage anymore. This was a playbook, a con, and I wasn't the first mark, just the one who came home early. James started making calls, quiet ones, a friend at the state attorney general's office, a contact in a military family legal aid group. He asked me to gather everything, emails, camera footage, financial records, build the file. Every detail mattered now. The more we dug, the more it unraveled. Jeremy wasn't sloppy, but he wasn't careful enough either. His name showed up on LLCs registered across 3 states. Most of the houses resold within 90 days. Fast flips, big margins. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about Rachel being unhappy or tired of being alone. It was about leverage. And Jeremy had perfected the art of taking advantage of women who didn't think they were being watched, who believed they were the ones in control. But Rachel had one thing the others didn't. She picked a target who knew how to fight back. The safe hadn't been touched. Not yet. But I knew it was only a matter of time. Once Rachel realized the bank accounts were frozen and the refinance money wasn't coming through like she expected, she'd start looking for other ways to cash out. And that safe, bolted to the garage floor, heavy, silent, forgotten, would become too tempting to ignore. So I wired it. Not with explosives, with eyes. A tiny motion-triggered camera, barely visible, tucked beneath the shelving. A tracking chip embedded inside the lock wheel casing, linked to my phone. I tested it from the motel before I left. Just a gentle twist of the dial, and it pinged me with a location, timestamp, and 30 seconds of live footage. Quiet tech for loud truths. The next step was psychological. I crafted a message through James, formal, cool, passive on the surface. The kind of message that slips past defenses but stabs just deep enough to draw blood. You can keep everything, it read. The house, the furniture, the car. I'm not fighting over scraps. I just want what's mine. That was it. No threats, no accusations, just bait. I knew Rachel, knew how her pride operated, knew she'd read those words and feel a flicker of victory. She'd think I was giving up, walking away, that I was tired and broken and out of fight. But she'd also feel curious. What was mine? What had I left behind? The idea would grow in her mind like a slow infection. She'd start thinking about the garage, about the safe she never bothered to open, about the possibility that, even now, I had something she hadn't taken, that she hadn't won, and she couldn't let that be true. Rachel didn't just want to move on. She wanted to win. So I waited. The motel room was still and silent, broken only by the hum of the mini fridge and the occasional siren from the highway. I kept my phone charged, screen face up on the nightstand. The camera system synced to my cloud. The GPS app preloaded. I didn't sleep much that night. Didn't need to. I'd been trained for long silences, for calm before storms. I just sat in the dark, back against the headboard, eyes on the door, and thought about the moment Rachel would try the handle, and how, in trying to take what wasn't hers, she'd be walking into something built just for her. The ping came just after noon. I was in the motel parking lot, leaning against my truck with a cup of gas station coffee, staring at nothing in particular when my phone buzzed. One notification, one line of text that tightened every muscle in my body. Motion detected, safe accessed at 12:04 p.m. I didn't rush, didn't spill the coffee, just walked calmly back to the room, closed the door behind me, and pulled up the live feed. There she was, Rachel, standing in the garage, barefoot, hair pulled up like she was getting ready for a casual afternoon chore. She had the safe open, door wide, knees bent slightly as she leaned in. The security camera gave me a perfect angle. I could see the documents, the sealed envelope, the aluminum case resting at the bottom. She reached in and pulled it out, turned it over in her hands like it was some relic from a life she'd only skimmed. I saw her lips move, a small laugh. She had no idea what she was holding. The trust papers from my father's estate, the bearer bonds, the hardware wallet tucked into the case with instructions in my handwriting, encrypted passcodes, a directory of wallets, a valuation chart, legal documents with my name on every page, notarized years ago, all perfectly valid, all beyond her comprehension. But she took them anyway. That was her mistake. It didn't matter if she understood the value. It didn't matter if she intended to use them. What mattered was possession. She had knowingly accessed a secure safe she had no rights to. And now she was holding federal instruments tied to a sealed trust and military pension assets. That wasn't just marital messiness anymore. That was theft. I recorded everything, saved the feed to the cloud, created duplicates on 2 encrypted drives. I sent one copy to James, one to a secure folder for the FBI. I wasn't just building a file anymore. I was building a case. I watched her walk out of the garage, the aluminum case in hand, like she'd just won. She didn't know what she had. She didn't know what she'd just done. But she was smiling, and that told me everything. I shut the feed down, locked the files, and sat back on the edge of the bed. No emotion, no fury, just a quiet, surgical sense of satisfaction. She'd taken what she thought was mine, but what she didn't realize was that now she'd stepped over a line, and the trap had snapped shut. I didn't have to call the FBI. James already had. The moment Rachel took the safe's contents, the wheels were in motion. But it was her boyfriend who made the first critical mistake. Jeremy tried to cash one of the bearer bonds at a bank downtown. Probably thought it was just another quick hustle, another untraceable payout. But bearer bonds aren't like cash, especially not the ones from my grandfather's sealed trust, marked and logged with federal identifiers. The second he walked in and handed that bond across the counter, he set off a silent alarm of a different kind. Not security guards, not local police, federal investigators. They contacted me 2 days later. 2 agents, Patel and Donovan. Sharp, professional, no small talk. They asked for everything. I gave them the camera footage, the signature comparisons, the refinance paperwork, and the copy of the forged deed, with Jeremy's name scribbled next to mine like we were high school lab partners. They barely blinked, just kept writing. Their questions were clean, direct, focused on intent. When did you last access the safe? Before deployment. Who had access to the garage? Only Rachel. Did she ever ask what was inside? No, she assumed it was empty. They didn't smile, didn't nod, just checked boxes, made notes. Patel said it plainly. She moved federally protected financial instruments across state lines without authorization. That's a felony. He attempted to liquidate them. That's another. Then came the rest. Wire fraud, because of the forged refinance documents. Mail fraud because the bank used interstate processing. Identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to defraud. Each charge landed like a steel-toed boot on concrete. Heavy, irrefutable. 3 days later, they moved in. I parked my truck down the street, tucked between a neighbor's hedges. From my angle, I could see the front porch. The house I bought, the house I built. The one they tried to flip like a pawn shop ring. The black SUVs pulled up in a wave. No sirens, no shouting, just doors opening in sync and agents moving with purpose. They spread out, approached the house in coordinated silence. Then, movement. Jeremy came to the door in basketball shorts and a t-shirt. He opened it halfway, probably expecting a delivery. That's when they stepped in. Fast, surgical. Rachel came into view seconds later, still in her robe, confusion written across her face like she didn't understand why 6 agents were inside her home. They cuffed Jeremy first. I saw him shout something, his voice too far to hear, but his face panicked. Rachel didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just stood there, hands behind her back, eyes scanning for a way out. There wasn't one. I sat in my truck, hands on the wheel, watching my old life get dismantled piece by piece. And for the first time since that email in Kandahar, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel loss. I felt the calm that comes at the end of a mission. Objective secured, targets neutralized, truth exposed, justice, finally, in motion. My phone rang the next morning. Her name lit up the screen like it hadn't in months. Rachel. I let it buzz. Watched it go silent. Then it buzzed again. Then a text. Please, I didn't know. Please, I didn't know. But she did. Maybe not the full scope. Maybe not how deep Jeremy's scams ran or what exactly he was using her to access. But she knew enough to stay willfully ignorant. She knew she was forging my name. She knew she was draining accounts and rerouting funds. She knew she didn't own what she was taking. But she took it anyway. The difference between not knowing and not caring isn't much when it's deliberate. I never answered her call, never responded to the message. I forwarded it to James, then archived the thread. That chapter was closed. Jeremy flipped first. He always would. Under pressure, guys like him always fold. He handed over everything, emails, transaction logs, names of previous women he'd run the same scam on. He claimed Rachel was just someone he was helping, that she didn't know anything. But the timeline didn't lie. She knew enough to file for a divorce days after I deployed. She knew enough to help him access the house, the documents, the money. She knew enough to stay quiet. Rachel took a deal too. Her lawyer negotiated a settlement, full restitution, forfeiture of any claim to the house, to my pension, to the bonds, to the safe. She admitted to forging the refinance paperwork, admitted to moving stolen property, signed every page under oath. No jail time, just total loss. The court sealed the deal in a single hearing. No drama, no apologies, just legal closure. I didn't attend. James did on my behalf. I didn't need to see her face, didn't need the last word. I already had it. She lost the house. I sold it 6 months later to a young couple with 2 kids and a Labrador puppy. They asked if it had good memories. Some, I said, but it's ready for new ones. She lost access to my pension. That was locked down tighter than a weapons vault. She lost the reputation she'd built as the perfect military wife. Friends stopped calling, family went quiet. She left the state eventually, according to James. Started over somewhere in Oregon. I didn't hate her. I just didn't feel anything anymore. The day the restitution payment cleared, I stood on the porch of my new place up in Montana, a cup of black coffee in hand, Scout at my feet. I looked out at the trees, the creek running behind the property, the silence I'd carved for myself. She could have had this peace too, but she chose a different route. She wanted freedom. She got emptiness instead. The house sold faster than I expected. Market was hot, neighborhood desirable, and I had no emotional attachment left to slow the process down. I didn't even step foot inside after the FBI raid, just let the cleaners in, signed the listing papers through James, and watched the sale finalize from 1,000 miles away. A young couple bought it, first-time homeowners, wide-eyed and hopeful. They sent me a thank you card after closing, said the energy in the place felt good. I smiled at that. Let them have the memories. Let them make new ones. I liquidated the coin collection next. Took it to an appraiser in Spokane who damn near drooled over some of the rarer pieces. He wrote a check that made my knees go soft for a second. Then came the crypto, transferred from the cold wallet, converted clean through multiple layers, then out into a trust account. That alone was more than enough to fund a simple life forever. But that wasn't the point. None of this was ever about the money. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my future, my name, my footing. Rachel had taken everything she could see. The house, the furniture, the accounts, my dog, hell, even the life she'd built off my back. But what she never touched, never even noticed, was the foundation I'd set quietly, deliberately, years before she ever thought about walking out. That foundation saved me. I bought a small cabin on 10 acres just outside Missoula. Wood stove, metal roof, creek in the back that sings me to sleep most nights. No neighbors for miles, just Scout and me, and a stack of firewood high enough to get through the harshest winters. I retired from the Army shortly after. 20 years. Enough. I'd done my part. More than most. I still wake up at 0500. Still keep my boots by the door and my truck gassed up. But I'm not waiting for orders anymore, just sunrises. Some nights, when the wind is quiet and the stars feel close enough to touch, I sit on the porch with a glass of bourbon and think about what could have been. Not with regret, just observation. Rachel made her choices. And so did I. Last I heard, she was working in another dental office out in Oregon. Jeremy's long gone. Prison will do that. Maybe she's found peace. Maybe not. Doesn't matter now. A few months back, I got a letter from a Navy wife in Fort Worth. Her husband had been targeted by Jeremy's scheme too. The FBI gave her my name. She said, "You don't know me, but you saved our home. Thank you for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away." I pinned it to the fridge. I read it sometimes when the silence feels too big. Because that's the thing about clarity. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with stillness. And finally, that stillness is mine.